All right. I'm assuming. Yes. There we go. We are live. All right. We're going to get into our diabetes education, specifically insulin resistance talk today, and some Daniel prayer talk at the end. So stay tuned. But Devin wanted to come in and say hi. How you doing, homegirl?
Hey guys, y'all, this day 1 and day 2 has been incredible. And I'm so grateful for those of you that are taking action and really pressing in for breakthrough. That's what we asked of you when we invited you into this challenge. I know, you guys, I have come from like if there was ever such a thing as like negative self-esteem. Yeah. I didn't believe in myself. I had tried everything. I got to a place where I literally had no value for myself. And I'm sharing all of this because I didn't believe in myself enough to even like show up and do the work to get the breakthrough. But it was through just small steps of faith. And that's what this challenge is all about, of really like trying to remind you, encourage you, and also, of course, like we're giving you more than just small homeworks and challenges, but we're giving you an opportunity to no longer put your trust in yourself or your ability to, take care of yourself or have breakthrough and healing. That's God's job, right? God's the Father. So we're the children. He takes care of us. Hey, Grace, thanks for joining us this evening. And so with that, for those coming on, and this might be your first session with us, if you have missed out, you've missed out. Guys, tell them what they've missed out on in the comments. But if this is your first session, thank you for joining us. You are in for a treat. Delia is going to really dig into help you understand what is insulin resistance, what's going on in your body, and what is the solution to reverse it. And so with that, I'm going to let her take it away. But I just wanted to encourage you that these small challenges that we're giving, they are opportunities for small steps of faith. Guys, think about, as Delia and I are here, darling, I thank you, but no thank you. Yes, okay. So right after, what was I saying? Talking about do your homework, because every time you show up, every time you write a comment or you share what's in your heart and you bring it into the light of this community, that's another area, another victory for you. It may be small, but think about David was given 5 small stones and he took down Goliath. So we have to believe that those small actions of faith are actually the thing that God is going to use to bring our enemy down, to take down the giant. Hello from Tennessee, Facebook user. Can you give StreamYard permission so we can see your beautiful face and name? There's a link.
Hi, Ricardo. That's his name.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Ricardo. Thanks for being here. All right. I'm not trying to take over this session. I just wanted to encourage you guys. Delia is going to take it away. Bring the fire. You go, girl. I'm going to be backstage cheering you on, and I'll be in the comments. So see y'all after.
All righty. Woo. So yes, thank you, Devin, for those encouraging words. Like, I just love hearing her talk. Like, she just speaks to my soul. And I know a lot of you are feeling that same way. And so, what a balance we have here. We have the soul speaking just prayers and wisdoms. And then you got the little nerd, put your nerd glasses on for this one. Me just kind of breaking down the science and the understanding of the biochemistry within your body and explaining the foods and how they work. So yes, that's why God brought us together, right? We kind of like complete each other with a complete message of truth and healing for you guys. And so The message for today, the theme that we've been doing is, hi, Mary, how are you? Is peace. Okay, so I want to give you peace in one we already know. Shout out to Giovanni, shout out to Renee, shout out to, I think it was Monica. You guys were posting your blood sugars and they have drastically reduced. I know Giovanni, you were previously in the 200s, 300s range and you went to 88. That and not only was that such an amazing number, you were one of the first people to hop on live Friday night. That's 2 days before this challenge started. And you were declaring healing and you were ready to commit to this. And God has showed you favor. And so that's just an amazing testimony right there. God will show you favor when you're listening to his guidance, his wisdom, and acting in accordance with, those ways. So with that, I want to give you peace in knowing that, y'all, God, we already know is going to give you that supernatural healing and those declarations that are going to give you peace in knowing that you can heal and reverse your diabetes. But also there's an amazing thing that he's done in building our bodies. It's an intricate biological system that already has these inner workings that science already understands, that shows us that if we do things in alignment with Daniel's way and this Daniel challenge, that just on a biochemical level and biological level, your body will start opening the floodgates for healing. So we have two things in action for your healing journey. And we got supernatural powers of God, but his intricate system of our body that he's made, that science is now proving, the Daniel diet, Daniel challenge that we put together, is an important piece. So let me go ahead and go into my, I got my slideshows. Get your notes, get your questions ready. I'm going to try and keep a good pace on or check the notes periodically if you guys have any questions, but I'm going to start with share my screen. Here we go. Share, and share. And one more time, I guess I have to click 3 buttons before I get in here. So you guys get to see my little live stream. And now let me get into presentation mode. So before we get into everything, again, since we are talking about, let me get into present mode here. Oops. My computer's acting slow. Present. Okay, there we go. Why doesn't want to present? There we go. Okay, there we go. We're talking about diabetes, type 1, type 2, all the different forms of it, and insulin resistance. Again, I'm clarifying, I'm not a doctor. I'm just giving you information that wasn't presented to me by my doctors or by my husband's doctors when he got diagnosed, but I'm so thankful it was presented to me from an outside source. And I was able to take that information and apply it and use my own discernment on what worked for me and why, and understanding how and why it worked, so that my husband could get his results that he got. And, when we're talking about getting off medication, that's something that you need to do very closely with your doctor, because they need to kind of, they know that timeline better. And so definitely let them know what you're doing, because it is powerful. This is super, super powerful, you guys. So I already touched on it yesterday, but let's get into it again today. And I want to start with a Jeremiah verse. We're going to close out with some Daniel verses, but this is one that just gives me so much peace when I read it. And so nevertheless, I will bring health and healing to it. I will heal my people, and it will let them enjoy abundant peace and security. That is God's promise to you guys. And he's giving you all the tools, and he is here ready to activate those healing powers and that healing for you. And this understanding of the insulin resistance and the carbs and how it affects your body is just going to amplify that. Okay, so once you have all the wheels turning, it's this really amazing, beautiful thing that God can do within you. So just to clarify, this is the Daniel challenge for diabetes. This is something Devin and I have created. It's a new thing. We mentioned it before yesterday's session, and I just want to remind you. So there are some other Daniel forms of diets that are presented in the Christian space. And I'm not saying one's good or bad or whatever, but I just want to let you know this one's tailored for diabetes in that it's optimized for insulin resistance. So there's a very popular book called The Daniel Plan by a really well-known Rick Warren. And I just want to clarify, it's very different. Okay, so the first thing people were putting in the comments on our original ad was assuming it was the same thing. So in the Rick Warren version, they do allow meat. Okay, that's one of the big things, and we do not. So I just want to clarify, if you come across any other Daniel thing, if it's not Daniel Challenge for diabetes, it's different. So just to clarify, we have what we allow is any fruit, any vegetable, and water. Okay, that is true to the scripture. It is all about God's garden, what he placed on this earth for us to eat that grows from the ground. So that's what you can just go to town with this stuff. Devin's put together some amazing recipes. If you haven't gotten the meal guide, it is in the unit section, and we can also place the link in the comment section of this video, just so we have multiple areas so you guys can't miss it. And what you want to avoid is oil, meat, dairy, and processed foods. I'm going to get a little into more details of what that means, the whole processed aspect. And oil, meat, and dairy are pretty self-explanatory. So that is the difference. So this is a new thing. The Daniel Challenge for diabetes is a unique form of approaching this Daniel verse, this Daniel scripture. And we have the diet, but paired with the other factors of prayer and supernatural healing, heart posture that comes along with the holistic way the body thrives. So to clarify, so you get a little bit of a visual, these are the different categories. You have fruits, veggies, and then tubers. I didn't even realize what this was a thing, but they're basically the root vegetables. So some people are a little confused, like what consists of a vegetable? I like to make things simple. If it grows on the earth and it's in God's packaging, you're good to go. If it's been processed or made, altered in some way, that's where you're going to want to have a little understanding of how it was made, what's in it, are they whole grains or not? So we just want to keep it simple. So whole grains means, quinoa, barley, brown rice, not white rice, because white rice has the fibers taken off and the, exterior nutrients, which makes it white. But that has a higher glycemic impact on your body when you eat it. Even oats. So one thing I want to mention for the whole grains, though, is during these first 3 days, as we're clearing out the insulin resistance, I advise to limit these and probably not even include them in the first 3 days so that your insulin resistance will clear out so that your carb tolerance is better. So in the beginning, your carb tolerance is going to be a little low. So these might be a little agitating in the beginning. So that's why I would say stick with the fruits and veggies, really. And then if you need a little extra punch, add some legumes. And then later in like the 21-day type of session, then we can add a little bit more of these fun guys here. So that's the main explanation. If you have any questions on this, definitely just let me know in the comments, and I'm going to check real quick. Ricardo, can you share how to make green veggies such as spinach, kale taste better? Ooh, it's all about the dressings. It's all about the salad dressings. And we do have Devin has some in the food guide. And what I like to do is just prepare a huge batch of salad dressing in advance. And in our 21-day guide, we have a whole salad dressings page where if you have salad dressings, you put it on any greens and it tastes amazing. Like, it's all about the dressing. You got to dress your salads up real good. And another thing I do is I sneak greens into a berry smoothie. So fruit and berries are so amazing that you can sneak in a little cauliflower and you won't know the difference. You can sneak in a little kale, you won't know the difference. In the mornings, I'll have some raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries, because all those berries are super high in antioxidants and they're lower glycemic. So in the early phase of this transition, the lower glycemic is better. And then I sneak in some riced cauliflower just to add a higher nutritional density to the meal. So that's kind of my cheat in what I do. And I love those questions, Ricardo. So again, here's a little visual on the difference between a whole carb and a refined carb. So, you know, we're going to upgrade our carbs right now. Like that's the whole point of this. Is most people categorize carbs or sugar as an all-in-one. That's why the research is so confusing, because they'll just say carbs and they don't clarify whether it was white rice or brown rice, or whether it was, you know, a processed or a non-processed. So they don't really, that's what makes things confusing. But luckily we have plenty of research that does have all those details that do give us some answers. So, so yeah, as you can see, fruits and veggies all day. You have starchy vegetables like potatoes, you have beans and lentils. And then on the bottom here, you have rice, which is whole grain brown rice, quinoa, oats, and corn. And then pasta, I would say in the beginning, again, we want to steer a little bit clear, especially the first 3 to 10 days, to let everything clear out so that whole grain pastas you can start including if you have the tolerance for it. Because where we get into a tricky situation with even whole grain breads and pastas is that the source, the quality of how it's made, you don't know if they used pesticides and there's glyphosides in it that can, you know, trigger agitation within your system. So we really like to keep things as God intended. So for the Daniel Challenge, we really focus on these right here. So what I mean, these two are going to be your main squeeze. But for those of you that, I don't know about you, but I was always a big eater. So, in those moments where I just felt extra hungry, then I would add some extra beans or a potato, but I would really make the main chunk of my meal those greens and those fruits and vegetables. So that's really my format of how I did things. And so these are just, you know, we kind of, you can tell, you know, if it's something, just if it's a refined carb. Like this bread is white because they took out all the nutrients to turn it white, because normally it would be brown. So you can kind of tell by the texture and the color if something's been refined and processed. Same thing with the white pasta. They took out all the nutrients, the fiber, to make it a little bit softer. But what that does is it digests in your system quicker, which makes it so that your pancreas has to work harder. And we don't want to do that. So just a reminder, when you're eating in alignment with the Daniel Challenge, you can eat in abundance. So this diet was originally taught to me by the founders of The Biggest Loser, the TV show. And they were just amazed because they're dealing with people that had multiple hundreds of pounds to lose. And this was the perfect diet because all they really wanted was quantity. And so look at, when you're dealing with quantity, this is 400 calories of just beef or chicken, and this is 400 calories of whole plant vegetables. So that's really the key difference. It's almost impossible to overeat when you're very strict with that alignment. But as soon as you add oil, that's a whole other thing where that creeps up in calorie density and offsets this wonderful picture here. So that's just another reminder. You can, hey, Giovanni, I see you in the comments. I feel I don't have the tolerance for any carbs. So Giovanni, that's a wonderful thing to let us know, so you know your body, right? So I want to challenge you guys to really keep it as clean and basic as possible. So the fruit and vegetables, really just focus on that as your body starts to clear out. So think of like a messy house or a messy room. Like you, in the beginning, stuff can start clearing out. Like you can pave a pathway to your, you know, the bed, from the door to the bed, but it's not going to be fully cleaned until you've had a few more days under your belt to do the extra sweeping, dusting, vacuuming, whatever it is, like it needs a little bit more time to completely get there. So that's why we do recommend in the first few days to be aware of that and know your body. But what I do say, if there's a make or break moment where you're like, I just need to have more, something besides vegetables or something besides fruit, then in that moment, then go for that potato instead of that Twinkie, right? So it's about being aware of your limits, but knowing in those moments where you might want to make a different choice that's not in alignment, then just go for the higher starchy vegetable, and that's totally fine. Let's go ahead and get into the protein aspect of things, because that's always like the number one question is like, well, how do you get your protein, So I just want to be clear that it's available in so many plant foods. The way God's food is packaged is it has a little bit of everything in it. It has a little bit of fat, a little bit of protein, a lot of antioxidants and nutrients. And so you really can't go wrong as long as you're eating enough calories. And even then, remember, our bodies are built where we can fast for up to 40 days, and so you're not going to starve yourself to death. That's for sure. Like, as long as you're eating enough food, you're usually getting enough protein. And if that's something that you're concerned about, beans is always my go-to. Like, just up your little lentils, your beans, and you're good to go, because they're packed. I think it's like 7 to 9 grams of protein a serving. And one thing I do want to mention, which is something I learned more recently, because people are so into their protein, they overdo it and they don't realize that protein is stored as fat or waste in your body when there's an excess amount of it. So people that are like eating a bunch of protein and then having those protein powders on top of it, like, you're overloading your system with that. And then it ends up getting converted and stored as fat in your body, which then contributes to insulin resistance. So that's something that when you're eating God's way, you can't overdo it. When you're taking extracts of proteins or extracts of fats, extracts of whatever, then you can overdo it. And that's where we've kind of gotten to with the diet. So the Western diet. So let's get into some science, shall we? But how about before I do that, let me just check the comments real quick to see if anybody had anything, because put your nerd glasses on. I'm going to introduce you to scientist Dr. Randall Cycle real quick. But oh, hey, Miss Insulina, aka Christy. Good to see you on here. I've had gastric bypass and was some absorption of protein. So yeah, if you know your certain situation, so if the absorption of protein is an issue, then you would want more than the average person because of that. And think of it like, so there's certain people in certain scenarios that are going to need more of something because of their lifestyle or their certain situations. So think of athletes. Like, the reason why protein became such a thing is because all of the professional athletes who their entire life is committed to working out, building muscle, right? They were the ones that needed extra protein and had to kind of cheat to get that extra, because they were going above and beyond the normal human function of working out. And so that's where they saw the benefit. But then everybody else saw them doing it. And then they're like, hey, let's do it too, even though they're sitting sedentary on a couch for like a majority of the day. So, so someone that works out 6 to 8 hours a day as a full-time job versus someone who doesn't, like, there's going to be definitely some different protein ratios that need to be had. So again, when you're eating fully packaged food, those ratios tend to sort themselves out. If you need a little bit extra of something, then you can start looking up what plant foods have the higher value of that nutrition that you're looking for. So if it's protein, just look up high protein plant foods, and then you're going to get a ton of charts. And so what about all wheat flatbreads? So D. Washington, wonderful question. So these are, again, I would advise against in the beginning, because some people have celiac condition, which that takes a little bit more time to sort itself out. So we want to have the least resistance as you guys go on this journey. And so the breads, we wouldn't introduce during this first 21 days, I would say. But if you're in a position where it's like all you have is bread and you have to pick, between whole grain bread or a donut, or even whole grain bread versus white bread, like, then definitely go for the one that is more intact, more whole, nutrient dense. So, but again, challenge yourselves. So these are some great questions. And, the Bible does have a lot to say about bread. And so the quality is important. Back then in biblical times, they used to soak their grains until they sprouted. So I know some of you might be familiar with the verse in Ezekiel 4:9, which describes a bread recipe. And in that recipe, it's all sprouted grains, millet, and all the seeds and the grains are sprouted. And that's another difference, is they learn that sprouting it helps aid in the digestion of it. So I think bread, it's a yellow, it's kind of one of those questionable areas, just because we don't know what's going on in the preparation and the manufacturing of it. So we want to be in control of our health right now. So we want to be in control of the food and knowing what it is and where it came from when it's coming into our bodies. So wonderful. I'm loving these questions. Okay. So, okay, let's get into little good old Randall here. I nerd out on this stuff, and I know I don't know, like, I may be weird, but it's just something that excites me because I've seen it working in my husband, and now it's giving me more clarity and more peace in knowing that it's not just something I have to wait on God's time. I can accelerate God's time for myself or for my husband. We can, God is working for us, but we can help him help us, right? And so this is what gets me excited and just understanding. So what Randall did, he, in 1963, his name's Philip Randall, and he discovered that carbs and fat are mutually exclusive fuels. And so he was able to demonstrate that fatty acids and glucose compete for entry into the cells. So what that means is you're supposed to have one or the other in your body. If you have both, it creates a scenario where they're kind of battling for territory. And when that happens, that's where we get this whole Western phenomenon of the Western diet. So when you have them exclusive, that's where you've seen the results. So that's why we have the two opposite diets that have the most research in terms of helping people with weight loss and insulin resistance and things of that nature, in terms of a scientific setting and testimonial setting, like, is the whole food plant-based, not to be confused with vegan. This is the Daniel Challenge for Diabetes, which is the whole food plant-based. And then on the opposite spectrum, you have the Paleolithic ketogenic diet, which is all just animal fat. Like, it's the complete opposite: fats and then carbs. And so the question is, one of them has nearly 100 years of research confirming it, which is carbs, using carbs as fuel that reduces insulin resistance. The fat, though, what people are finding is over time, there's short-term success in terms of weight loss and insulin resistance, but there's a long-term effect of increased insulin resistance over time. And so this really is just exciting in that, knowing that it's what we've been taught is kind of like, it's not what I had originally been led to believe, right? And so I just love having these revelations because I know God's placing it before me, and he's helping me make sense of what happened with my husband and why he was able to eat carbs. To be honest with you guys, he was eating way higher carbs. Like, that first, after diagnosis, he was having oatmeal and berries for breakfast, which, again, we don't introduce that until about 10 days later. But yeah, like, he was still able to eat carbs, fruit, vegetables, even starchy vegetables, and reduce his insulin usage and eventually get off his medications. And so I want to quickly define what insulin resistance is, because that's the storage of fat in cells that aren't supposed to store excessive fat. So it's pretty much when you have this competing scenario of fats and carbs, one of them's going to win, one of them's going to lose. So one of them's going to get burned, another one's going to get stored as fat. So that's what happens. And when you have insulin resistance, it creates a carb intolerance. And that intolerance, not being able to process your carbs like you normally should, that's triggered by the excess fat, which hinders the glucose receptors. So that glucose and insulin communication that happens where glucose needs an escort, okay? But fat does not. So that's kind of what happens is fat is able to make its way through, and therefore it throws off the signals of your body to start catering to fat, and therefore it curbs the process of carbohydrate metabolism. So that's really what's happening. And what people tend to do is blame, especially in the diabetic space, and especially the way we were taught, is they blame insulin and carbs for the problem. And therefore their solution is to eliminate it and just do low carb, but then you're eating a bunch of fat, which we're seeing here can lead to insulin resistance. So what I like to do in terms of like an analogy or an example is that, think of a headache, right? It's not, the head isn't the cause of your headache. It wouldn't make sense to remove your head to get rid of your headache, right? Like the root cause is not the head. So by removing the carbs, that's not the problem. That's just the symptom. So that just like your head and headache, the headache is the symptom. The head is not the problem. There's something underneath happening, whether you're dehydrated or hungry or whatever it is, there's something underlying that's causing your head to act funky. And same thing with the carb metabolism. It's not necessarily the carbs that are the problem. There's something getting lodged in between that is messing up that communication, blocking those glucose and insulin receptors from, making a connection. And then what happens is it builds up in your bloodstream. So this is just kind of a more visual of what I'm trying to describe here. And again, if you have questions, let me know what you think. Dee wants to know about tofu. So again, tofu in the beginning days is not part of Daniel's diet. So we don't do it in the initial phase, but as you start altering and adding variations down the line, that's something that I would partake in. But again, we're doing the Daniel way. So when we're being strict with him, that is off limits for now. Okay, so let's get into the whole fat and carbs competition. So this is a visualization of when they compete, like I was mentioning. So as the Randall, Dr. Philip Randall confirmed and proved, is that they're fighting, and it's usually one or the other that needs to thrive. And when you think about this in a biblical sense, in biblical times, like the way God created our lifestyle in accordance with nature was during the, warm, bountiful spring and summer seasons, there was plenty of crops and fruit and vegetables that people could feast on, and they wouldn't have to go hunt or go get other sources of food. And all those foods that grew naturally in the garden were all low fat, higher carbs. But during the winter times in certain areas, that's when those crops wouldn't produce, and they would have to rely on an alternative form of fuel. So thankfully, God built in a backup system in our bodies to be able to metabolize fat instead of just glucose, so that in times of famine, you could still survive. So that's what ketosis is. It's that survival mechanism and allows your brain to still function even with the lack of glucose. But anyways, so that's the whole competing scenario. And that's how I see it in a full, the full sense of things. Like God built in ways for us to thrive, even in moments where we didn't have the things that we should have normally. So here's step one. When the fat and carbs enter your system, like they do in a Western meal, like a fatty cheeseburger, right? They both enter at the same time. But what happens is the fat enters first because you have carbs that are packaged in more of a, layer system where, especially the whole grains, you have to unpack it before you can get to the actual sugar and glucose portion of it. So since it's a little bit slower, the fat kind of makes its way first into your digestive system. And then once it gets into your digestive system, it triggers, hey, we're in fat mode, so let's prepare our digestion for that, which takes a little bit longer. So let's slow things down. So I don't know if you've been in, during the holidays where you've had a very high fat meal paired with a bunch of other, carbs with it, and you just feel a little bit slow, a little bit sleepy, a little bit groggy. That's this scenario happening. It's when your fat gets there first, and then it down regulates everything else. So the carbs build up in your, in the assembly line of things, and then it triggers a down regulation of insulin receptors. And so the whole insulin and glucose communication gets broken. And so then the glucose builds up in your bloodstream, which causes that insulin resistance that we're seeing. And so that's what causes those high blood sugars and fasting glucose scenarios, that especially in type 2, where there's that excess fat stored in muscles and tissues that aren't meant to store fat. So any questions on this part? I know, I hope I'm breaking it down for you. I'm having a very bad headache. Is this normal? So the headache might be from coffee. So if you're a normal coffee drinker, like my husband was a coffee addict. So every person that was a coffee addict that I've worked with that's done the Daniel Challenge, they did experience some form of a headache. So what we recommend is just staying hydrated. You can add a little Himalayan salt or real salt, like a high quality salt, to your water to add some electrolytes to help hydrate you a little better. That would be my guess. But again, tag me if you have more questions, or comment here if that's not the case. But yeah, for coffee drinkers, headaches is a very normal thing. And some people, depending on where you're at with your nutritional levels, if you haven't really detoxed, I know people use that term loosely, but if you've never had a lot of antioxidants in your diet and you haven't given your body that opportunity to kind of release some of the things that have built up in your system, some people do have kind of like a detoxing symptom where they don't feel as great in the beginning, but after everything clears out, they feel amazing. And so with the coffee, it took about 2 to 3 days. Definitely after 3 days, I would say I've had 3 or 4 people that said after 3 days, their headache was gone and their energy felt way better than it did while they were on coffee. So they were able to get a coffee high without the coffee. And the coffee high was better than their normal days on the actual caffeine. So wonderful question. So this is something they should teach in high school. I believe we would have less people. Yes. Like that's Giovanni. That is an amazing point. And I think part of it is just people lost track of the research. And what I found amazing while doing all of this research and reading several books and webinars and presentations and summits and, really investing a lot of money and a lot of time. Like I've invested thousands and thousands of dollars in just educating myself and on products and food, I just made sure we put our money to where it was most important, and health is one of the most important things, right? So we often forget that, so the reason, that's why I'm so passionate about this. It seems like everyone should know about it, but they don't. And so one of the things I learned while doing this research was how there was one of the authors of the book I was reading did his PhD on insulin resistance. And during his thesis, he was, researching and doing a lot of studies where he learned how they actually turn mice, the mice that they use for research in diabetes, the way that they actually trigger the onset of type 2 diabetes in mice is altering their food, where they lower the carbs and increase the fat ratio in their meals. So essentially, they're doing a low carb, high fat diet to these mice to turn them into type 2 diabetics. And so it's just kind of mind-boggling that at diagnosis, they're given that humans are given that same diet recommendation almost. So again, it's kind of crazy, but it sounds counterintuitive until you understand this whole breakdown of that Randall, Dr. Randall discovered, and how fats and carbs are meant to be exclusive, and how, that works within your bodies. And so yeah, this is just kind of, yes, health is wealth. I love it. And then Ricardo wants to know frozen versus fresh vegetables or fruit. Is there a big difference? Ooh, I love this question. You guys are coming with the good questions today. I love it. So with frozen versus fresh, there's no difference really in terms of you can have both. But what I do want to mention is that I used to think fresh was like not as good. But in reality, the way it's like flash frozen at its pure ripest point preserves that high quality nutrient density longer than a fresh fruit that's been flown out from Florida to California and sitting on a shelf for a week. So over time, every day that nutritional density gets lost. And so the freezing process actually helps preserve it a little bit. So you don't have to steer clear of frozen. And I love it in my smoothies because it gives that nice icy texture. And but the best thing is, which I'm starting to work on, excuse me, I have a hiccup, is to grow it in your garden. I have an apple tree that is starting to bloom and produce fruit for the first time ever. And you just feel a difference in the way that apple tastes. You can tell the difference because you're eating it while it's alive. That's what was meant to happen in the Garden of Eden. You just pluck it and eat it while all the essence is there. And I'm not going to get too far into light, but what plants do is they absorb light, and we are beings of light, and we are essentially using the light absorption that they've gotten to create energy. We're kind of using them as a middleman to get that. And so when you have that fruit that matches that light spectrum that that you live in, there's a double whammy health effect that happens. So sorry, I'm going on my light tangent because I'm kind of getting into that right now. So yes, here we go. So fresh versus frozen. So hopefully this all makes sense. Again, take notes. If you have questions, just tag me in the group here, and we will definitely try and make this so that you know what's going on. And I just wanted to give you guys a visual here. This is actually from a documentary that you guys may have heard of because it's kind of blowing up. It's called Game Changers. And so this one focused on competitive professional athletes that are using a whole food, plant-based lifestyle as a competitive advantage because they realized this helps them heal faster. This helps them not get sore after their workouts. And this allows them to, have a higher endurance. And, a lot of top tier, like Novak Djokovic, who's, he's the reigning Wimbledon champion, he's whole food plant-based. Serena Williams, is known to be plant-based. And even Tom Brady, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, which he's kind of on his way out, but he is 80 to 90% plant-based. So these athletes are kind of learning that our body was meant to do this, and our body will thrive if we're giving it the right fuel. So that's an interesting point I want to make about the Daniel diet, is because most people see it as a fast, as deprivation, as something that's suffering, right? And I don't see it that way at all. And I want you guys to reposition yourselves into that mindset of, for the first time, you're going to be giving your body that pure optimum fuel that it's been thirsty for, that we've been depriving it of. So we've been fasting all our lives of good food that is meant to heal our body, mind, and soul. So this is just a visual from that movie. It's called Game Changers. And again, I recommend, if you guys want to double down on just your understanding, this documentary does a wonderful job. It's called Game Changers. It's on Netflix. There's also another one that Tabitha Brown mentioned, which got her to try vegan, was What the Health. And then another one of my favorites is Forks Over Knives. So those are 3 documentaries that you can look up: Forks Over Knives, What the Health, and then Game Changers is my absolute favorite. So this is a screenshot from there. And all they did was take the blood from 2 athletes after, I think these were Miami Dolphins wide receivers or something. And they fed them a plant black bean burrito. So they had the exact same burrito. One, the protein was black beans, and then the other, the protein was organic grass organic free range chicken. And they did it with organic grass-fed beef too. And so you'll see the difference in the blood, that this one, it's transparent and it's clear. And this one's a little bit cloudy because it has kind of the fat mixed in, which, so, the plant-based diet, it's low in saturated fat, free of cholesterol. So it helps that blood viscosity and that thickness, so that, your nutrients and the transport of things in your body can happen a lot smoother than if you have a lot of clutter happening. So when you add this with carbs, fat and the carbs, that's where we're getting into trouble in the Western diet, where you have this kind of sticky fat, little droplets in the blood that then builds up, causes cholesterol, and all these other issues. So plant-based diet improves arterial function and flexibility. So that's like the interior lining of your arteries, and it leads to better blood flow. And so that's really important in distributing nutrients and just overall well-being. So what people find is, we are talking specifically about diabetes, but there's tons of research and tons of testimonies where once you start doing this, there's other people that have healed from so many things, whether it's cancer or even like rheumatoid arthritis or different conditions, where they're able to reverse what's happening. And then when they see that, you just naturally want to make it a lifestyle. Because if you can go from a place of having pain and not feeling healthy to like thriving and having abundant energy and just your lab work showing amazing things, then that's what happens. So, and then lastly, when compared with meat eaters, plant-based diet, one of the key differences that I've discovered with plant-based is that it's a game of antioxidants. And I'm sure you've probably heard that term. I don't know if you really, hey, Heather, good to see you. Is there a big difference in type 2 versus diabetes diet versus type 1? Yes. Yes, that's a good question. So yes, like I was saying, like this is the base that will start opening the floodgates of healing. In a sense, it's going to start clearing things out so that the communication within your cells gets clearer. And now when we're talking about, let me finish this thought on antioxidants, then we're going to get into the difference of type 1, type 2, because I definitely want to address that. So wonderful question, Heather. I'm so glad you asked that. So with antioxidants, all those really are, is I call them like the garbage men in our body. Like they are packaged in plant foods in abundant amounts. So think of all the superfoods. There's goji berries or whatever. The reason why they're super is because they rank really high in the antioxidant spectrum of things. And so whenever you have something high in antioxidants, when you add it to your diet daily, it naturally starts doing healing things like subtly, and so there's even a berry that I'm going to discuss tomorrow. So make sure you guys pay attention tomorrow. I'm going to discuss the amla berry, which has been known when diabetics take it daily, they don't have to change anything else other than adding the equivalent of one of these little berries, and it will perform better than the leading medications in terms of, I can't remember if it was blood pressure they measured or if it was glucose, but either way, when it's helping one area, it kind of just helps all areas so that it's alleviating that stress from your system, which has a complete whole body effect in terms of improving things. So yeah, antioxidants, it's really, you just want to maximize the antioxidant value of what your meals have, and that's plants. And so when you're eating a bunch of plants, then you're eating a bunch of those guys, which it's the little army that just takes all the free radicals out, the free radicals that are kind of causing damage and stress and inflammation. It just helps take those bad boys out, So that's really what it is. And then to answer Heather's question, type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is insulin resistant. Insulin resistance is a key component, but there's also an additional element that's coming into play in that there's an autoimmune response happening. And so with that, it gets a little tricky in that for my husband, we learned that his autoimmune response, or that excessive stress that was on his system, we were renting a home that had toxic mold. And so that mold overloaded his system, which caused a gene to get triggered. And that suppressed his detoxification capabilities to where his pancreas kind of got stressed out, and the beta cells started kind of self-destructing, I guess. And so, so with that, there's different theories on the actual what's happening to the beta cells in type 1. There's theories that it's an autoimmune response destroying them, but there's other theories that it's a low-grade infection that is causing them to burn out. And so I've been trying to get to the root understanding definitively of that, but what I'm noticing is with each scenario, there's certain environmental triggers like heavy metals, chemicals in your home. Like, I don't know, like I see so many people using those Clorox bleach things, like, those fumes you smell, those are chemicals. And someone who has a compromised immune system, it does tax it and add unnecessary stress that their body isn't sometimes capable of handling. And so using clean home household ingredients, because you breathe all that recycled air. So environmental, and then heavy metals, mold, toxic mold, which I mentioned, and then Lyme's disease. So some people have been bitten by a tick and they acquired a Lyme infection. And so those are 4 key areas that cause a secondary issue within someone's body that creates that autoimmune response. And so that's why type 1s, it's a little different in that definitely reducing the insulin resistance and maximizing insulin sensitivity is the first step. And then targeting that autoimmune response that's happening. So for my husband, we got him out of that mold environment. We learned about those genes and we maximized his diet, and we gave him additional support elements to help kill any low-grade infections or to boost his system so that it can thrive better. And then we halted what was happening. So what's happened is he's been able to preserve those beta cells that were originally on their way out. My belief is that he would have been the road of a normal type 1, but we halted what was happening in its tracks. And now what we're doing is we're in that process of regeneration. And so that's where we get into more of the higher level. That's why I'm getting into light. I think vitamin D plays a very important role. And most people don't get enough light exposure, and they're exposed to blue light, which causes a disruption in their mitochondria, which is the main energy piece of your cell. So there's other factors where we start with diet, but that's what Kingdom Health is. So for those of you guys that saw the Kingdom Health offer, there's additional layers of health that you can add to diet that will really just hit all the markers of what diet may be missing. So prayer is an important piece, and that's something people forget. Prayer, imagination, visualizing yourself in that healthy state. People forget the power of the mind. There is, Joe Dispenza healed himself from a crushed spine where he was not supposed to be able to walk ever again. And his only option was surgery. Yet he used the power of his mind, and he knows that God is that ultimate source behind it. And he was able to heal his body with just the power of prayer and thought. And so that's the overlooked thing. And that's something that I overlooked. So early on. And so that's what we're focusing on now. And that's what I want to get into in this second half of this presentation. So let me just real quickly, this is an article from Michelle McMacken, who's an honors grad from Yale, board certified physician, assistant professor at NYU, medicine at NYU. And she wrote a very good article on the 7 things that happen when you stop eating meat. And so this just hits a lot of the things as to why people receive benefits no matter what the condition is, honestly. So reduced inflammation. So again, the antioxidants and phytonutrients help take out all the free radicals, which cause stress and damage in your system. And the nutrients helps feed those cells so that they can be stronger and function better than they would before. Cholesterol levels plummet. That's just I have the lab work to prove that. And it's because you're not eating cholesterol. Your body naturally produces cholesterol. And so when you're adding more cholesterol and clouding the bloodstream, like we saw in that visual, that's when stuff can get clumped up, caught, and built up in your system. When you're clearing things out, everything else that's been building up clears out with it. So heart disease, high cholesterol, that has absolutely been proven to be reversed when following these guidelines. Microbiome upgrade. Devin was talking about all the fiber, the prebiotic factor, and foods that really promote the good bacteria in your stomach. So that's a whole microbiome is a whole other session. I'm not going to go into that just yet. Altering gene expression. So I mentioned that my husband had an MTHFR gene mutation, and that got triggered from the toxic mold. So what these foods do is they help optimize your cells so that you can turn on and turn off cells based on what you're giving your body. So if it's in an optimized, healthy situation, it turns off those triggers that were turned on by, certain environmental stressors. And so then you have reducive chronic disease, the natural protein ratio, which we discussed, and then the environment. There's a whole environmental factor that I'm not going to get into because I don't want to, we're already almost an hour in. So let me just, I will check some comments, and then I'm going to talk about Daniel's prayer, and then we will be done, y'all. So thank you. So type 1. Yes. So Heather, let me know. I want to talk with you actually a little bit more in depth one-on-one. So let's have a discussion. Tag me in some questions, and then we're going to have a little discussion after this. So, and Paula says, so interesting about the light plants. Would love to know which plants you are referring to with the most light. Oh, hey, all right. Light discussion. That's a whole thing in itself too. But yes, we are beings of light. And when you think about it, light is the essence of life. Like if a plant doesn't get life, it doesn't grow. And therefore nothing grows, and everything else eats the plants. And so where they can't prosper. So I'm not going to get into that just yet, but it's super fascinating. And I think Deanna was her name, was mentioning she was having issues with sleep at night. At night, wearing these bad boys, see the red, it helps you produce more melatonin, because the blue light triggers a suppression of melatonin in your brain because it thinks it's the sun and it thinks it's noon. So like your phone and your screens, like those are all a whole other factor that are played in. And I think my husband, he's a software engineer. And so I think his life of being on a computer, being exposed to blue light all day, every day, I think that played a factor as well. So yes, we're okay. We won't go down that rabbit hole just yet. So lastly, I want to have Daniel 6:10. This is a scripture where it says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem 3 times a day. He got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. So this is, again, we are the Daniel challenge, and this is incorporating the essence of Daniel, where, of course, his food is one of the key components, but the other key component is his discipline to be, praying and being constantly connected to God. So what I do like to reference when we do these challenges is that he did pray 3 times a day. And so if you'd like to mimic the way Daniel prayed, try and make sure that you schedule maybe before your meal or, however it works out for you guys to add at least 3 prayers where you're just, acknowledging your blessings and praying for what's ahead, knowing that he's doing something profound within you in this moment, in this challenge. Like this is, I just get goosebumps watching your videos, seeing the progress and seeing the engagement of what you guys are doing, because I know God is calling on you. Like I'm honored that he's using us as a vessel to really share some important information. Like Giovanni said, if she had been educated about this in high school, she wouldn't have this diagnosis and but it's all part of our path, our learning process, our growth. And so for my husband, we say his diagnosis was a blessing because it allowed his mind to open to these truths, to know that they're real, and so that we don't have to rely on other worlds trying to decree to us. So just like in this scripture, the outer world, they were trying to decree onto Daniel what to do, and he wasn't having it. And so it's really, with food, it's become the same thing. The outer world is trying to tell us all these things and alter and get us away from this Daniel way, this godly food way. And so it's really, that's another piece to it. So when I close out here, I want to, let me just see if there's any more questions. Okay. I've learned so much. Do you have some books that, yes, I have a ton of books I can recommend to you. So let me, maybe I'll put together a document, but put your questions. I love that books idea. So let me get you guys a list. And I want to close out with a prayer from Daniel, from the book of Daniel. So this is something, again, that I created during our last Daniel challenge, because when you read the full book of Daniel, his diet was a key component, but his prayer and his obedience was a key component. And so I just took out all the prayers that were given in the book of Daniel and made it into one compiled prayer. So that's what I want to close out with today, just so you can, get a glimpse of how Daniel prayed and the words that he used, so that you can then be inspired to add these to your prayers, to your declarations, to your health journey with God here. So, so yes, let's, and before I do this prayer and close out, I just want to mention that, I took a picture of my salad today because it was so good, and I'm going to post it later today. And I want to encourage you guys to just post some of your meals. Start encouraging people with what you're eating. It's always fun to see all the fruits and vegetables and colors on people's plates. And I also want to remind you that tomorrow there's going to be a slight time change for my segment, because we have a special guest. We're going to have, he's a doctor of podiatry, and he works specifically with type 2 diabetics. And so we have a special diabetes doctor interview for you guys for day 3. And so that'll be at 4:30. And so we still have our normal time in the morning, but just want to give you guys a heads up. And then again, for your homework, post your key takeaways or your favorite meal of the day. And whether it's a picture, a post, or a live stream, it's up to you. But I really enjoy, it is my intention to watch every single one. During the middle of the day, sometimes I get caught up with the kids, but at night, I'm there on my phone. I'm like, oh, look at my homegirl there. She's doing her thing. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of every single one of you guys. So let me just leave it at that, because I'm just, yeah, okay. So let's get to this prayer from the book of Daniel, shall we? So we have, I thank and praise you, God, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power, and you have made your truths known to me. Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. Praise be to the God who has sent his angels and rescued his servants. We trust in you, O Lord. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. I know that the Spirit of the Holy God is in me, and no mystery is too difficult. Let me be drenched in the dew of the heaven. I renounce my sins by doing what is right. I acknowledge your grace and your sovereignty, for he is a living God and endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. Lord, the great and awesome God, he keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keeps his commandments. Lord, you are righteous. I seek favor of the Lord our God by turning from my sins and giving attention to your truth. I set in my mind to gain understanding and to humble myself before my God. My words are heard. I thank you, Father, for your response to them. In Jesus' name, amen. So that's the prayer. And again, the mindset at the end, I set my mind to gain understanding. And that's where we're at right now. You guys have made that commitment to understand what's happening and how to alter your path with God. And so he's calling upon you, and we're going on a new journey together. And I'm just so excited we get to do it together. So that's it for now. Let me close this thing out. And yeah, so thank you for joining us on this road to Kingdom Health. And I look forward to seeing you all in the stream, posting your pictures or your updates, your takeaways, and we'll see you then. Have a good night. Bye.